Welcome to the Zandbergen Report, where wealth strategies and investment wisdom collide, featuring your distinguished host and certified financial planner, Bart Zandbergen.
Welcome to the Zandbergen Report, a showcase for wealth strategies and investment wisdom that's essential for our evolving world. I'm your host, Bart Zandbergen. As usual, we have in studio today Paul, our engineer.
And a full house.
Paul, do you realize the firepower that we have in our
I
studio
am
today?
beginning to grasp it minute by minute here as you tell me what these folks do, and you just casually say, "Oh, they were on PBS yesterday," and you know.
PBS? Are you kidding me? They're way more than PBS.
Way more. This is bigger than that. Where were they on? I know that. I thought they were on PBS.
Well, with that, I'd like to introduce Andy and Katie Cherkasky, criminal law attorneys. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great
Thanks
to be
for
here.
having us.
Of course, of course.
They look like such nice people. How can they be criminal attorneys?
You got to make people feel like you're nice.
So, Paul, you know that one of the questions I ask most of my guests are, what is their guilty pleasure?
Yes,
right?
yes.
Have you ever asked me mine?
You know, I never have. That's a good point. I know you have several, so I can tell just from the show, you know, wine and cars and other things like that.
Yeah, so those, okay, we could call those guilty pleasure or hobbies, but my guilty pleasure is following criminal law cases.
You're kidding. I have
Murder
no...
mysteries.
Oh.
You said that as soon as we met. You said, okay,
I'm
we got to
so
talk.
engaged with you. So we're going to get into that, but I think, so you guys are
So you're a fan. You're a fanboy of these.
I'm a fanboy.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
on the fanboy list.
All right.
What I find really fascinating about you guys is that you're husband and wife. You work together, and you have, I don't know how many. You have a lot of kids.
We have
Five kids, yes, that's true.
right. And working, so working mom, working dad. So how did you, as attorneys, were you attorneys when you met, or were you in school? How did that come about?
So we actually did meet as attorneys. We were both prosecutors for the U.S. Air Force, and we met doing a case together, believe it or not, a rape case.
I was
Very
your senior
romantic.
attorney.
You're on the
Yes.
same. So you're on the same side.
We were on the
Right.
same
Okay.
case.
We were on the same case, yes.
on the same side, and we had just met. And I came in from out of town to help her with this case, and it was all professional all week long. And she's like, "Why aren't you interested in me?"
Wow, Katie.
Well, that's partially true. We
So
did
that's
put
the
a
She was offended.
That's the way he remembers it.
right. That's basically it's somewhat accurate. But yeah, we did meet doing this case together. So we were already lawyers at that point as prosecutors. Now we're
Yeah.
defense attorneys, obviously. But
Yeah.
we spent many years prosecuting cases. Especially Andy, he was a senior prosecutor for the Air Force. So he
Can I ask what kind of cases you prosecute? Is this like what's the show that my lovely wife loves to watch with Mark Harmon in it about what do they call them? NCIS,
Yeah, that's exactly
that's
what
right.
it
but
is.
an Air Force version of it.
Right. They call us JAGs.
JAGs, right.
Judge
There was a show
Advocate
on that,
Generals.
too. She was
Right,
the
yeah.
boss,
That's
right.
been on for years and years. I like to think of myself more Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men than the CBS show. And Katie's my Demi Moore.
Perfect.
Wow,
Yep.
yeah.
Needless
Yeah,
to
right.
say.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, so that's exactly the same thing that we do. So in the military, there is this criminal justice system that's set up. It's very similar to any sort of criminal cases you would see in the federal world or in state cases, but it's all military members. The attorneys are military, except for on the defense side. If you're in the military and you're charged with a crime, you can hire a civilian attorney to defend you, which is what we do now. So people who are in a lot of trouble or in some amount of trouble, they choose to hire an outside attorney to assist them with their case. So that's why we're still involved with the military,
Okay.
even as civilians at this point.
Okay. Does the military law follow a different, I don't know, set of guidelines, or is it the same, basically
Well,
the same
they do
framework?
they have their own rules and statutes. It's similar to other criminal practice, but it's its own world.
One of the really interesting things about military law is that the people who are accused of the crimes, I mean, they're military members. So these are good, upstanding American citizens who raise their hand to support and defend the Constitution and risk their lives in the defense of the country. And if they had some sort of prior criminal record, they'd be out of the military. So this is typically people who have never committed a criminal offense before, and it's the first time they're going through it. So we're representing people who, by and large, are exceptionally good people and who, worst case scenario, got themselves caught up in a one-time thing, typically.
And is it a military-related offense, or is it?
It can be anything. So that's a good question. It can be anything. So we do everything from murder. We do a lot of sex assault, rape, you name it, financial types of crimes, pretty much everything you can imagine.
Yeah, I would say sexual assault,
fraud,
defense, and when I was prosecution, that's the majority of the cases, because that's kind of what that type of, that's the main focus. But it's both against other military members and against civilians. It's not limited to only military-specific offenses. It's as long as they're in the military may try to be the ones who prosecute instead of local prosecutors.
Okay.
So we really see the full picture.
Wow. Does anyone ever say you can't handle the truth?
Oh my gosh, I've had those moments in court. Yeah, you're like, you got a witness on the stand and you're going back and forth, and I'm up in their face, and they say something like that. I love those moments, and the juries love it too. They're waiting for it all week long. If we don't have a moment like that after the trial, the juries will come up to us and they'll be like, why wasn't it?
Yeah.
Why wasn't there more? I wanted something else.
So before we get into more of that and some of your cases and so forth, but let's just get real and raw for a second. You guys got 5 kids. How do you do the work-life balance? You're working professionals, and we'll talk about your commentators. Is it called? Would you say commentators?
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Okay. How do you do it?
Well, it's definitely been interesting. We have a non-traditional setup, I guess. We work primarily from home, and we have very flexible schedules. We have help with the kids, obviously. Otherwise, we could never even take a phone call.
Yeah.
And we're pretty much used to every day being different and being able to just kind of run and do something that we weren't planning on.
Just like creates a totally different day, right? Because we started the day early this morning. I'm on the computer talking to clients. Katie's doing the best she can to run after some kids because we're low on child support, right, or on child care right now. And so she's running around with the kids. I'm getting work done, and then her mom's coming over so that we can come do the show with you. But that's any day of the week. Things like that happen.
Yeah. Have you ever had, I'm sure you have, when my almost 4-year-old was maybe 4 months old, we had a child care issue, and I was home, and I would take in a professional call while, trying to hold the baby and trying to manage the mute button, and wasn't very effective.
Literally like the story of my life sometimes. I'm
right.
like, okay, quiet. But yeah, we try to limit that, but sometimes you have to take a call, or I'll tell clients, like, hey, I'm home right now, but, what do you need? Sorry, there's a lot of noise in the background, but at least I can.
We try to be really
explain
honest with our clients about
Yeah.
this situation. I think that's when you get yourself in trouble, really, in any profession, but certainly in the law. It's when you start to try to create something that's not real. That's people will very quickly understand that. You say, "I'm home. I'm home this week. I'm working out of the house this week. Call me anytime. I'll take a phone call at 11 o'clock at night. But if you call me at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there might be a kid in the background."
Yeah, at the end of the day, the brain power is the same, right? You still got the same brain, the same information, and
Got to live your life.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of that, you guys are on the news all the time. How did that happen?
Well, Katie, so we've always kind of had an interest in talking and getting our opinions out there, but nobody really wants to hear it traditionally until Katie wrote an op-ed last year when Kavanaugh was running for, or was elected or nominated for the Supreme Court.
That's a great story, too.
It's a great story. But Katie had a really unique perspective because we defend people who are accused of sexual assault all the time. And so she wrote this op-ed that was published in USA Today, and it led to a news booking publicist type person getting in contact with us and said, they kind of thought that we had a thing. And Fox News specifically has really liked us on air, so we've been doing it at least once a week each.
It seems like a weekly,
it's great.
right?
Yeah,
Both
they
of you.
call randomly. The publicists will, get a request from producers, and they'll say, "Hey, can you come do commentary on this story?" And usually it's only a couple hours heads up, and so we kind of like read as much as possible before we go on and do our best to get up to speed on whatever it is. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I don't even know what happened, and there's some huge story in the news, and there's like 10 million text messages on my phone, and so we just kind of quickly read it. We go and do what they call a hit for the whatever show that that they're
everything's
asking us
driven
to do.
out
So,
of New York, so
Yeah.
they're waking up first thing in the morning and trying to find out who their talent's going to be for the day.
Yeah.
You know, who's going to be the commentators, and so we're getting text messages at 5 o'clock in the morning. Hey, can you guys be somewhere in a few hours? And we're just
So, yeah.
waking up. We're trying to figure out what's going on, turning on the
Yeah.
TV to find out the news ourselves.
Right. So kind of a behind the scenes, do you guys actually go to the studio, or do you have something set up at home now because you're so frequent that makes it look like you're in a studio?
Yeah, so like Andy said, a lot of news is out of New York, so the anchors are primarily in New York. We
Yeah.
typically go to a studio in Irvine that's like
Oh, cool.
actually set up, and they
Yeah.
can do a remote satellite sort
Any
of thing.
network. Yeah.
Unless there's actually an anchor sitting in LA, and so they'll have us go and sit in the studio with them. And sometimes
Yeah.
there is fill-in anchors there. So it's been
Yeah.
a really interesting experience to do any sort of like live television, but
Yeah.
it's a good challenge. It's a good
Live
thing.
TV is very live. This is live.
Like
Horrifying.
live
TV
TV
is-
live podcast.
Like
Yes,
right now,
exactly.
yeah. I mean, whatever you're saying, it's just done.
And you have the
can't undo
monitor
it.
right there looking at yourself. And
Yeah.
You're like, well, this could be really catastrophic, but let's hope it's not.
So the Kavanaugh case, did you was that a big long case for you?
Well, Kavanaugh, I mean, the thing with Kavanaugh, I mean, obviously it was in the news. People were
Yeah.
interested in what had happened and whether he should be confirmed because there was these allegations that came
Yeah.
out that were really old and
Yeah.
that whole thing. So I wrote an op-ed just out of my own interest about the case. And I just decided to write about what I thought the case meant and why he should or shouldn't be confirmed. Okay. So I sent it out, just cold sent it out to a
Yeah.
couple publications, and USA Today wrote me back like immediately and said they were going to run it as an op-ed. And I was just kind of shocked because
Yeah.
it's probably one of the top 3 like big national,
Right.
distribution. So yeah, that was interesting. But I think I wrote from the perspective of a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney in that field about how you look at sexual assault allegations and why it is difficult to say, hey, this guy should lose his whole job and everything, his whole reputation over something that is now being brought forth all these years later, and why
Yeah.
we have to ask tough questions to people who make these allegations. That's kind of the nice way to put it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have and if stop me if I'm going too far, but did
Well, it's out there already. You can.
okay, so then at the end what was your hypothesis at the end?
Well, my hypothesis was that the article was entitled that Blasey Ford was a bad poster child for sexual assault victims, essentially, because people were getting very hysterical about the idea that when someone makes an allegation, that's all that matters, and we can't really ask any questions, even if things don't really add up or make sense. And from a criminal perspective, a criminal justice perspective, obviously, you have to look at things very closely and say, hey, does this make sense? Is there other evidence that supports it or confirms that what they're saying is true before you essentially ruin somebody's life? And we work with people all the time that are facing these sort of allegations. So maybe it's not a popular viewpoint, well, in some circles,
Yeah.
but it's something that I think was well received because it was pretty respectful about the idea that you can respect somebody that says, hey, this happened to me and I, really feel like I was a victim. And on the other side, someone saying, no, I never did anything wrong. And before they're found guilty in the court of public opinion, why we should be a little more careful about how we look at allegations and that sort of thing.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you can completely ruin someone,
Oh,
whether it's true or not.
beyond.
I mean, beyond
Easy.
ruin.
It's just all you have to do is say the words. I mean, and it's done. So
And Katie takes the position and has many times outside of just this specific area where if someone makes an allegation of sexual assault that they were sexually assaulted, as citizens, as friends, as just neighbors, we should take them seriously and express our sympathy to what they say. But as soon as the notion that they were sexually assaulted turns to a named individual and you're asking to somehow hurt the character of that person or their professional standing or even cause them to be criminally prosecuted for the alleged crime, now we need proof. And as much as the statement of the individual may be proof, and there may be internal consistencies and there may be parts of it that make you truly believe it, maybe based on how they say it or how they reacted to it, there needs to be something more than just the word of a person to say that it happened before you injure somebody else's life and career. And so we're looking for something like text messages in today's day and age, something like DNA, videos that tend to support it, other people who may have seen things just before it or just afterwards. It's not like you need the actual videotape in the room itself, but you need something else out there before you try to.
Well, it's just a presumption of innocence. I mean, you're flipping things on its head when you say believe all women or believe all victims, whatever the kind of saying is. That is the opposite of the constitutional presumption of innocence that people have. And so you have to understand that there's a reason that exists. You have to give people the benefit of the doubt, and criminally that means something before you rush to judgment. And so I think that that's kind of why I feel like it's important to say that when it's so easy to make allegations and it's so devastating to people's lives and reputations and careers and freedom. Before you make a final decision about what happened, you should look at all of the facts.
I mean, Bill Cosby, I'm such a huge lifetime fan of his, and you know that didn't end well. Kevin Spacey
Did not end well. No, it did not.
Kevin Spacey, well, I don't
Yeah.
know.
This is
Well,
part of
that's
the problem.
that's
We
a good
don't know.
example.
Yeah.
We
Right.
heard
well,
last
Cosby
week that
is guilty. Like, I think we can agree with
Literally
that.
guilty
He's
because
been
a
found
jury has
guilty.
determined
it's done.
it. Yeah.
And I mean, he's definitely a creep.
it
Yeah.
went
But-
through the process.
Yeah.
But Kevin Spacey, we heard just a week or two ago that his criminal charges are dropped. And we heard nothing else. He was in front page news for weeks and weeks. We have all the details of the allegations against him. They drop it, and we hear nothing else.
Yeah.
And people just, I've
But
heard
he's
things.
blackballed. He's
Right,
dropped from
exactly.
all the
Right,
shows. I don't know if they'll
exactly.
ever
And
work
that's what
again.
happens. I mean, it's like it's such a
There's no
such
effort to
a-
acquit him in the media.
Well, yeah, and then it's done.
There's no
Once-
explanation.
Yeah, once people decide, once the media decides to like villainize somebody, then it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
And it really is very difficult to recover from that. So
Yeah. So that whole adage of no publicity is bad publicity is not true when it comes to
I would say when it comes to
actually,
sexual
you're
assault
right. That's the one
allegations.
exception. That's the big exception.
So which actually leads to something super current. I think that's what you were on the news for this week was Jeffrey Epstein, right?
Of course, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein.
So there's all sorts of conspiracy theory things going on there. What can you say anything about it?
I
Remember,
wish
it's
that
my
I knew
guilty
the answer.
pleasure.
I think, yeah, exactly, and that's a crazy story. I think
So
that
crazy.
it's been interesting.
Yeah, Katie
but
was on Fox, and the producer specifically said, "Don't speculate about the rumors."
yeah, they said
and then-
don't talk about conspiracy theories. And then I think it was Neil Cavuto. He specifically asked me, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "Well, I tried to get around it because I don't want to get in trouble."
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not even conspiracy theory. Okay, there's some serious conspiracy theories out there about Clintons or
yeah.
Trump or whatever. The truth is that something did happen. That it could be anything from the guards weren't doing their jobs, they were just understaffed, that people weren't watching him when they should have been. And I mean, really, he shouldn't have been able to kill himself in federal custody. No inmate should be able to do that.
Yeah.
These facilities
Well, I'm
have
kind of mixed on
well,
that.
they
I
have
mean,
a responsibility
they
to
have
keep
a
them
responsibility
alive,
to
but
keep them in there. I mean, the
practically
primary
speaking-
responsibility is keep them inside the facility.
Well,
But when they're taking like a
don't let them
bed sheet-
escape. That's
yeah,
your number one
right,
job
that's
as
number
a-
one. Number two is keep them
Yeah.
alive. So you keeping them in there. There's a lot of people in there. You can't watch
right.
them
I
around
mean,
the clock.
practically
They've
speaking,
got
you're going to have
things-
problems.
Yeah, they've got things like bed sheets, and they've got. If somebody wants to kill themselves,
Devices to
they
commit
tend to be
suicide.
able to kill.
Right, exactly. But with him being so high profile and
Right.
so incredibly
Very
like
true.
watched, and he was already on suicide watch. Obviously, that was a
Yeah.
big point of discussion. But no one's going to be on suicide watch formally for much longer than a couple of days because they can't sustain the manpower.
is that the limitation? Or
Well, I mean,
give
it
or
depends
take?
on what their doctors are saying, but
Yeah.
typically it's because there's so much manpower required to keep checking them every 15 minutes or whatever the regulations are.
Yeah.
It's not practical. But he was supposed to have a roommate. The roommate was moved out early. There's all these things that happened.
Yeah.
If people wanted him to die, and or if he wanted to die, I think there could have been ways that could have happened. Not necessarily conspiracy, but somebody could have easily paid somebody off to turn the other way or give him something.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. We don't have the autopsy results yet, but
Right.
that's not a conspiracy to me. That's just practical. Like, why would he want to? I don't blame him in some way because what does he want to live for? To go through all this
Right.
for endless amounts of time and potentially forever to be dragged through this? He's humiliated, I would hope.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
reminds me of our conversations we often have with our clients. People are calling us on their darkest day in their life. They're accused of some crime. Maybe even they're being let off to jail. Typically speaking, the people we're working with, they're going to be at worst serving a specific period of time in confinement. So maybe months, maybe years, but they're going to see light at the end of the tunnel.
Some of them, most of them.
Yeah. Epstein, on the other hand, was
Yeah,
not.
he was
so
probably
Right. I
not.
mean, that was it for him, and he had already asked to be released or to be put in some sort of house arrest or whatever. It was
That didn't
denied,
work. Yeah.
and so he's living in some dirty cell. I mean, this is a big
billionaire.
difference from like it's just not something that I don't think he would have wanted to sustain. So if he wanted to kill himself, there's ways that could have easily happened, and it obviously did,
Yeah.
that don't involve conspiracies of any sort.
Yeah.
So
Well, I guess we will see.
we will see. There's lots
There's
of
a-
investigations into it.
I'm sure you'll
Somebody
be
will
on
get
a
in
lot
trouble.
more about this.
There
yes.
was another conspiracy that that website 4chan or whatever
Yep.
that they had posted about his death like before
Ahead
it was.
of
Yeah,
the
but that's
news.
just
Oh, yeah?
easy. That's like somebody in the facility could have done that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's not that conspiratorial to me. It's
Yeah.
like, well, there's some like worker there or some staff member that saw his
Right.
body
Right.
getting carried out or heard about it. So
Yeah.
they
Alright.
released it.
Any other like cases from that are really super interesting? You can say names or no names. It doesn't matter.
Well, you recently
Yeah.
got a case overturned.
That's true. We have a lot of really interesting cases, but this case is a good one to talk about. I think
Yeah.
it's actually been in the media somewhat, quite a bit recently. So the case involves a Marine Corps colonel who
and that's
was
a very high-ranking
Right.
individual. I mean, it's a
It's
1%
like a very-
of the military.
yeah,
Okay,
a
okay.
colonel is like and to be court-martialed and convicted of something as a colonel, I mean that's like unheard of, right? It really is. There's like I don't even know how many per year.
It happens once a
One
decade
to-
at most.
yeah.
Type of thing.
So anyhow, my client, we did not represent him at trial, but he was convicted at trial of a child sex crime. Okay, so something
Acquitted of many other
acquitted
allegations.
of a lot of allegations, and there was one allegation that he was convicted of, one big one at least, I should say, and it was involving touching a child that was like a family friend's daughter. Okay, that was the allegation. He's always maintained his innocence to it, and the evidence was very sketchy, but he still lost at trial. On this one specific charge. He got acquitted of all of these other things. Anyhow, we represented him on appeal. We recently found out about, I guess it was in the beginning of July, the appellate court agreed with us and overturned his conviction. They said that there was no evidence that
Recently found out. I mean, Katie
Yeah.
wrote this epic appeal to this case. This is
Yeah.
a tremendous effort that is it's the equivalent of like the greatest closing argument you've ever heard, but in writing.
Wow, thank you.
I mean, it's really
Got a
good.
compliment.
So what
Was it
happens
50
when you're
pages, something like that?
It was no, that was the opinion. The brief was like way longer. But what happens when you're convicted at a trial, whether it's military or anywhere else, you get to write to the appellate court. You file briefs that are essentially like outlining legal issues of why your conviction is bad. Okay, why you should never have been convicted, whether it was something wrong with the jury, the judge, all these various issues. So that's what we do on appeal. So I represented him on appeal. We filed this massive brief and we said he should never have been convicted. There was no evidence. There's all these other problems with the charges, etc. The court agreed with us and overturned his conviction. And it's been in the news in San Diego. Newsweek covered it actually, which is kind of interesting.
Wow.
And it's
And just today we found out that the
Yeah.
appellate court like doubled down on their opinion. That's the best way to say it.
Oh, wow.
So the government, after losing, they came back and said, "Well, will you reconsider it? Will you please not go that direction?"
Yeah.
And they
said no.
today they said
Denied.
no, denied.
So-
we win.
Did he lose his rank and job?
Well,
He's been sitting in
yeah,
jail.
he's been in jail for
He's still in jail to
30
this day.
But
Yeah.
when you win an appeal, don't you come?
Well, that's the interesting part. It actually is not an automatic thing. There's
And
like
it's
all
not
these.
instant.
The government can ask
Ugh.
Yeah, it's kind of messed up.
It keeps
really
going
is.
through a chain of reconsiderations and other courts
But
Yeah.
as far as we're
involving
concerned,
themselves.
he's
it's
been
done.
exonerated. He's exonerated.
be out any day
He
now.
will be released, and he will retain his rank actually when he's out.
Yeah.
Officers don't lose rank,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's
And his job, or will he be?
no. Well, that's all more
Practically,
complicated.
he'll be on his way to
retired.
retirement.
I mean,
Okay.
yeah, there's other issues, but it was a big victory. So
Yeah.
that was we were very happy for him.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. And you guys have a podcast as well, right?
That's right. We have a podcast called Legally Bound, Love, Law, and Politics, essentially. So kind of what we talk about on the news, what we do in our day-to-day life, and
Yeah.
a little bit of the family life.
Oh, great. And where can people find that?
wherever you download your favorite podcast,
so
Apple or
Yeah.
wherever you find it. Like I said, legally bound.
Okay.
And you motivated us after
Mm-hmm.
our
That's
discussion.
true. We
that's
never
right.
started it until we met
We
you.
had the idea for a long time. We met
Yeah.
you. You talked about your podcast, and we're like, we got to do this.
Yeah.
And so we did.
So great.
Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Any recent subject on your show that we can talk about just for a minute or two?
Well, so just in our last episode, we did like a love episode. So we kind of do different episodes at different times. We pick a different one. And we did one about power of positivity, positive thought, how we try to live our lives. It's not always successful.
Yeah, of course.
My sister was on the show. She's a psychotherapist. And so she was kind of talking about some of the psychology behind it.
Yeah.
We try to talk about just what drives us through an average day. And the idea of positive thought is kind of one of those things. In a different love episode, we talked about what we fight about. So if people want to know what we fight about,
always have one thing.
we expose that. What do we fight about? We fight about little things. We fight about whether we offended the other person. We don't fight about things like money. We fight about, when just little nitpicky things. That's usually what starts our fights.
How do two attorneys fight? I mean, I guess
Not well. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean,
In
yeah,
a husband
that's a
wife
whole other story.
situation, I mean, in the courtroom is one thing, but in a husband wife, that's tough, isn't it?
I think if you were filming it, I think the funniest part would be that in the middle of one of our fights, we could be like literally yelling at each other, and the business phone rings, and we stop, we take the call, we
Yeah.
attend to the issue,
Yeah.
and then we go back to the fight.
That's awesome.
You got to do what you got to do.
That's awesome.
Do you ever have your kids convene a court and then you each present an argument and about
That would be a good idea, actually. That would
We
be.
just send them straight to timeout.
I often ask if I can go on timeout at home with my 4-year-old. Please give me an hour timeout.
Yeah, really.
Doesn't really work. I always have the privilege of asking my guests, what is their ultimate lesson learned?
It's humility, I think, obviously, in life. And I think that's both because of the time that you are doing the job that you're doing and the times that you lose and the times that you win. You see our clients who were flying close to the sun, they were having great success in life, and they did something that knocked them down. I think it's to have humility even with all the success that you enjoy in life.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that I would say you really aren't never too old to try something new and to actually just go for whatever it is that you're kind of dreaming of. And we've had a lot of different experiences, even in the law, and tried new areas, and it's been really exciting. So I
Like a new podcast.
exactly podcast.
Well, it's been great having you guys. 30 minutes goes by pretty fast.
It does every time.
Yeah.
How can people reach you if they need you?
Well, our website is goldenlawinc.com, and I'm on Twitter at Cherkasky Katie.
And I'm on Twitter at Cherkasky Law. Cherkasky is Cherkasky, kind of as it sounds. But you can find us on Twitter. You can find us on our podcast. It'd be great if people reach out. We love getting feedback from people too.
Oh, great. Or just turn on the news.
That's right.
Well, again, guys, thanks for taking the time. I know you guys have busy days.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Sure.
you.
And we look forward to being in the studio again next week. Cheers.
Tune in next week for the latest edition of the Zandbergen Report, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Catch up on our recent shows by visiting bartzandbergen.podbean.com. The Zandbergen Report is also available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Interested in being a featured guest on our show or have a question you'd like to hear us answer? Email podcast@bartzandbergen.com. Bart A. Zandbergen, CFP, and Letitia Burbaum, AIF, are registered investment advisors with Optivest Inc. and registered representatives with Gramercy Securities Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered by Optivest Inc. under SEC registration.